Welcome to the Worth Knowing live stream on the Cliff's Edge channel on YouTube. The Worth Knowing Substack, that's my Substack. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Twitch like Voldemort. I feel like I've split my soul and put it in 7 different places. Today, one of the most puzzling and important questions in American politics, not just for the Democratic Party, and yes, I tend to wear Dem Party goggles, but really for both parties and for corporate America too. What is happening with younger voters? Are they really turning in a massive generational wave toward the right? And as they begin to take hold of more power and more influence in this country, what's going to change? And what changes are they going to force all of us to make? And just to give you the bottom line up front, the jury is very much still out on those questions. The answers will have a lot to say about not just the 2026 midterm elections, but whether Donald Trump's MAGA Republican Party is going to be a long-term force in 2028 and beyond. So I want to set this up first for just a couple of minutes with what the evidence is telling us, what the hints are right now. And then in just a few minutes, I'm going to bring on today's guest, who is one of the true movers and shakers in politics right now and a true expert on engaging this younger generation of Americans. I want to start on the politics side, and then in a minute, I'll go just a little bit broader. The roots of this set of questions really go back almost a quarter century to 2002, when 2 scholars put out a book called The Emerging Democratic Majority. Rui Teixeira and John Judas argued that what they called the rising American electorate was going to create an enduring advantage for the Democratic Party. They pointed to young professionals in the new economy workforce. And for our younger viewers, new economy is what people were calling anyone tied to the internet or the tech sector in those days. Now we just call that the economy. And these were highly educated, urban, and mostly socially liberal young Americans. And Teixeira and Judas pointed to the growth among Latino and Asian American populations, among African Americans, all of whom were leaning toward or massively toward Democrats. They talked about the growing importance of women voters and secular voters. Now, the young voters of 2002 are not the same young voters that we're talking about today, of course. I mean, those young voters are middle-aged now, like me. They've gone from smells like Teen Spirit to smells like Ben Gay. But that basic idea that there was a rising tide of young, progressive, and increasingly racially and ethnically diverse Americans who are going to form a powerful political force really informed the thinking of the 2008 Obama campaign. And that historic success created an indelible impression in the minds of a generation of political operatives and political analysts. I was one of them. It certainly created an indelible impression for me. As a matter of fact, all the way back in late 2002, I was starting as the legislative director and deputy chief of staff for a newly elected Democratic member of Congress. And one of the major briefings that we received at the new member of Congress seminar at Harvard University that year was from Nancy Pelosi's right-hand man on this very topic, on the John Judas, Rui Teixeira research, and what the rising Democratic electorate would mean. During my whole career as a staffer on Capitol Hill and as a congressional campaign manager, this basic idea was sort of the swing thought in the back of my mind. But then a funny thing started to happen. In 2012, Barack Obama won re-election, but it was not, as people initially assumed, because of continued historic overperformance with the rising Democratic electorate. It was actually because he overperformed among white working class voters who were slightly older. And that was maybe the first sign that there was something a little off in the calculus. And of course, then the disaster of 2016, it came down to a lot of factors, but it demonstrated that the idea that demographics was destiny was flawed. A progressive majority wasn't necessarily a fait accompli in America. Now, Teixeira and Judas have gone on to repudiate their earlier theory. They point out that the newer generation of young voters, the ones that started to come of age 10 to 15 years after their original work, were not the same. They had been shaped by different experiences, and it was not necessarily the case that they would stay loyal to the Democratic Party. And that brings us to 2024 and the question of what happened to younger Americans. It wasn't great. For our purposes here, by the way, we'll really talk about voters under the age of 30 as younger voters, although in a moment, when we go a little broader and we bring in today's guest, we'll probably stretch it to Americans under age 35. Now, in 2024, according to the Democratic data scientist David Shore, 75-year-old white men were more likely to support the Democratic presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, than 20-year-old white men. He actually told the New York Times that young people have gone from being the most progressive generation since the baby boomers to potentially becoming the most conservative generation that we've experienced in 50 or 60 years. On the other hand, according to a piece from a psychologist who's a generations expert in the Atlantic this week, while young voters voted for Donald Trump in 2024 at a much higher rate than they did in 2020, it was like 10 points higher among men, 6 points higher among women. Their positions on issues do remain distinctly progressive. 69% support legal status for undocumented immigrants, 69% support legal abortion. She believes that the shift is more pronounced away from the Democratic Party than toward more conservatism, or perhaps the answer is more cultural and more in how we live our lives. That connects to today's guest. Just yesterday, the New York Times featured an article titled "Less Burnout, More Babies: How Conservatives Are Winning Young Women." It describes a young conservative women's event hosted by Ghoul, Charlie Kirk, and his organization Turning Point USA, that captured a rapturous audience and is seeing growing popularity. And the article points out that as much as the focus since 2024 has been on the manosphere and young men who turn toward Trump, young women have also been growing more interested in other ideas than progressive ideas, more connected to questions of how to balance out your life, navigate questions of health and parenting and nutrition. So what gives? What's going on? What's the connection between the political and the cultural? Where is all of this going? There's really no one better in this country or any other country asked than Amanda Litman, who just wrote "When We're in Charge, the Next Generation's Guide to Leadership," which is a no BS, this is her description, no BS, I love it, playbook for millennials and Gen Z who are stepping into leadership roles. She's also the founder of Run for Something, America's premier organization that recruits and supports young progressives to run for office. Super author, super mom, and super organizer, Amanda Litman. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me. This is fun. I'm excited.
I am thrilled to have you back. I always enjoy our chats. And I want to connect right to our main topic. How is being a supermom? How is having it all? It is a challenge. I attempt to be a normal dad, not even a super dad, and I find it exhausting. How are you doing?
How am I doing? Thank you for asking. I have two little kids. I have a 2.5-year-old and my daughter will be 9 months tomorrow. Two little girls. It's chaos. They're crazy. They're so much fun. As you know, kids are so much fun, but they are, it's tough to be raising yourself. My 2-year-old in particular is a very 2.5-year-old in the best possible ways.
Yes. It all gets better when they're teenagers. I promise you.
Comforting. I'll take that.
Just check back with me in 10 years and we'll go from there. Well, speaking of the kids, what gives? What did you notice about what's going on with your generation? I guess we're separated by a little bit. We're not technically the same generation, you and I. What did you notice that's going on with your generation that made you, in addition to doing Run for Something, want to write this book?
So When We're in Charge, as you said, is a no bullshit guide for millennials and Gen Z on how to lead differently. When I started Run for Something back in 2017, I was 26, about to turn 27. I was single, having fun, had just left the Clinton campaign and had no idea what I was doing. I was waiting for someone to tell me how to be in charge, and I didn't see anyone doing it. So along with my co-founder, Ross Morales-Ricchetto, tried to build Run for Something in a very different way. We really wanted to build a company that treated people well and was also effective at accomplishing our goals. And over the last 8 years, we tried to muddle our way through it. We didn't always get it right, but we really, really tried. When I went on maternity leave for my first daughter, when she was born November 2022, and I was trying to find guides on how to do that, on how to take maternity leave as the boss, I could not find anything that would walk me through how to do it. I would Google how to take maternity leave. And it was a lot of how to ask your boss for leave, which I'm the boss, 1, and 2, we need to fix paid leave in America.
Yes. Lean into yourself.
Lean in. I could not find a guide on how to do this. And it was emblematic of every leadership book I'd read over the last 7 or 8 years, which felt like they didn't speak to what it felt like for me now. When I came back from that maternity leave and I started talking to the Run for Something candidates and alum across the country at that point in time, so many were making national headlines. Mallory McMorrow, Zoe Zephyr in Montana, Megan Hunt in Nebraska, even people we hadn't worked with, but other young leaders, the Justins in Tennessee, who were entering spaces not meant for people like us and showing an entirely different way of being present, of leading. I started connecting the dots here. There is something different about how millennials and Gen Z show up and take power and wield it that is totally foreign to the folks older than us and looks totally different, feels totally different, and has, I think, different outcomes. So decided to put pen to paper on what I experienced and what ultimately more than 130 other leaders I spoke to for the book experienced, to really understand what does a new generation of leaders look like and how do we do it? How do we still get things done while not treating people like shit?
You are talking to these people in your Run for Something professional work every day. I mean, literally every day. And you went out and interviewed hundreds of these kinds of folks for your book. I am going to ask you a totally unfair interviewer question that is right out of Hack Interviewing 101. There should be like a chat GPT for that. Give me the nutshell sentence on what you think the difference is in this generation and how they grab power.
You don't have to be an asshole to be effective, is sort of the TLDR.
Gosh, I wish someone had told me that.
I know. It's like such a no-brainer.
Shit. All right.
And like, I think about this, it comes up in politics, it comes up in the workplace. You know, you think about the ways in which so many of us had bosses when we were younger, people who they had to work 100-hour weeks, you would get yelled at, it was hostile. There was like one of two ends of the boomer oversharing, which, you know, the person who is beep bop robot never brings any part of their community to work with them. And then the other end, which is like oversharing everything, your great aunt on Facebook who tells you everything about their IBS and their stepdaughter's infected nose piercing and how they had this really messy weekend and blah, 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 blah. And there was no space in between and no guide on how to be in between. You know, you think about the imploration, like, be authentic, be yourself. And then you're in charge of people. And like, you can't be yourself. I mean, you can like kind of be yourself, but you can't really be your full self. Not when you have a responsibility, not to your ego, but to your team. That tension of how to do it differently while still holding true to who you are and your values is what next generation leadership is about.
I want to try to create the crossover that I was setting up in the intro between your book, which I think is about broader culture, about corporate culture, about work-life balance, which is a hackneyed phrase, but is very, very real. It's about all of those things, but I want to connect to the through line of politics, which is, I mean, let's face it, that's what we're here for. You talk a lot in your book about what you just brought up, authenticity. There's another hackneyed phrase, be authentic, be yourself, yada, yada. It's good dating advice. It's good candidate advice. What does it mean to you though? Like what does authenticity entail? And what's the meaning of it for this generation where it's like, well, you're not like being, here's my IBS saga authentic, but you don't want to seem like a poll tested, simulacrum of a human being either. What does authenticity mean to you?
It means deep self-awareness. So like really knowing who you are, what your values are, what is it that you stand for? Like what is the core truth of who you are as a person? Part two, what does your team need you to be? If you're a leader, whether you have direct reports or you have a big following on social media, like what does your community need of you in order to accomplish your goals? Which that's point three, being really clear about what you're trying to accomplish. I propose what I call a model of responsible authenticity, which is being enough of yourself that you can be like a human, like the personality equivalent of athleisure, without any ego attached to it. Because ultimately leadership is not about me, it's about us. It's about our team. And I actually think we see really good examples of this in politics. We see people like AOC, like Zoran Mamdani, like Bernie Sanders, who cross different, generations, but who know who they are. They know what they believe. And then the question of their campaigns or their leadership becomes how to communicate that, not a debate about what they're trying to communicate in the first place. And that tension of like, who am I and how much do I give of myself to my team is one that each leader has to decide for himself where their boundaries are. But I think, again, you think about Bernie, you think about AOC, you think about Zoran Mamdani, each of them have so clearly defined boundaries for the parts of themselves they want to give away to their community, to their followers, to their voters. Like I think about, I'm a New Yorker, currently in DC actually for work, but I'm a New Yorker. My brain is deep in mayoral election today. And I've been thinking about Zoran Mamdani a lot as like a perfect embodiment of what next generation leadership looks like. And that he is so clearly himself. That's the reason he can do, countless video streams and interviews and go on every podcast and talk with influencers and basically be saying the same thing over and over again, because that is what he genuinely believes. And also he has a personal life and a private life that we don't know shit about. And that is a boundary that he has set. His wife, not up for discussion. His personal life, not up for discussion. That is the kind of like what authenticity looks like in modern day that more leaders need to be modeling. Clear values, clear communication, clear boundaries.
First off, I want to just address all the people in the chats out there. Thank you for weighing in, and I'm trying to pump all of these comments up here as quick as I can, including the ones that aren't necessarily complimentary to me. Tina Bradford, I wish Cliff was here more often too. I am doing my best. Don't forget, you can catch him on his live stream tomorrow and his exclusive Substack live stream on Thursdays. This authenticity question. Here's the thing that doesn't make, I'm just going to go ahead and be authentic about this. It doesn't make any fucking sense to me, Amanda. Watch Donald Trump in 2016, in 2020, as he mimes what he imagines it's like to mine for coal. Do you ever see this shit?
Yeah.
What is this? Watch him as he mimes driving a truck. He literally gets behind the wheel and he goes like this. Back when they were toddlers, when they were your kids' age, my kids could do a better job miming driving a truck than this lunatic. I mean, what on earth is connecting authentically about a billionaire fraudster plutocrat who doesn't know squat about how real people live? Now, look, I'm sorry. I don't want to unearth painful experiences for you. This is not the PTSD hour with Amanda Litman, but you directed email for Hillary, and Hillary, there was a lot of armchair analysis, including by me, that maybe the basket of deplorables comment was a problem because it struck a nerve, this idea that, well, Hillary actually looked down on people, and Donald Trump, he had no idea what people's real lives were like. But he didn't seem to be looking down. That feels like just as much bullshit to me as the overall Trump problem. I'm struggling with the authenticity factor in the age of Trump. Like, how can he get away with being so obviously inauthentic? And how can voters be demanding authenticity from the left?
Here's the thing, because authenticity isn't actually about the person. It's about what they make other people feel. Voters, I don't actually care. I, the voter, don't actually care that the leader is authentic. I care that they give me permission to be myself, that it creates space for me to be who I am. Trump, one, I genuinely believe that it's all jello and pudding up here. Like, he is performing his aid at every point in time. That is authentic, even if it screams bullshit to me. I think he's authentically a bullshitter. And his performance of authenticity, because it's always a performance. I think that's the key here. It's always a performance, creates permission for other people to do the same. It lets them feel like they can also be faking it, because we're all kind of faking it at any point in time. It is really hard for folks like maybe you and me to understand the appeal to that. But I think also the racism, also the bigotry, also the sexism, like, it allows people to feel like they too can be their worst selves. Not for me, but I can understand why people see that and think, if he, a successful man, can let it all hang out, so can I.
What are you hearing from all of the literally thousands of people you're working with to recruit for office when it comes to, how they want to do things differently? What are they saying? Like, what's not working for them and what's drawing them in?
They're thinking about transparency. They're thinking about accountability. They're thinking about clarity of goals in a lot of ways. They're thinking about vulnerability, how to be like present and show flaws and, fail in public. I think this is one of the things that if you have grown up online, which, I don't know how big of a difference of an age gap there is, but we're both pretty sufficiently online. Like I got my first email address when I was 6 years old. I still have it. I don't know how to log into it. It's an AOL account, but I've had an email address since I was 6 years old. I've been on social media my entire life. At one point, I've had blogs since I was 13, which I'm so glad I cannot find anymore. There is something very fluent about performing yourself online that comes with having done it your entire life. It is different for the 50 and 60-year-olds who haven't had to think about constant pure performance of self since they were 14. That's not to say they can't do it well, but I think that is something that next gen leaders, which I generally describe as like millennials and Gen Z, can understand.
Well, first of all, a big shout out to You Don't Like My Music. The Democrats can't even say the words poverty or inequality anymore. Interesting. And
I don't know if I agree with that, but I appreciate the sentiment.
Well, I mean, what is it then? What is it then that you think is what's working? I guess is the way I want to phrase it. What's working? Because you're recruiting like mad. And by the way, Amanda's thank you, Jim Williams, for putting up all of the bio info here. And I know we're talking a lot about Amanda's book, but she's also the author of a great Substack that I hope, oh, there it is. It's right there. Amanda Litman .substack.com, which I hope people will avail themselves of. And you give feel-good notes every week. Goodness knows I need some more feel-good notes in my life. Clearly, because you have feel-good notes to share, something is working. Something is resonating. What's working? What is it, as You Don't Like My Music suggested, that people are tapping into poverty, inequality? What is it that's connecting?
So Run for Something has had more than 50,000 people sign up to say they want to run for office since the election in November. We are likely to endorse more than 300 candidates this year. We actually have 19 candidates on the ballot today, June 24th. We have had 30 some odd candidates already win this year. We've helped elect more than 1,500 across 49 states in the last 8 years. And I'll tell you the things that all of these folks have in common. Really, really specific issues they want to tackle. In some places, that's affordable housing, it's childcare, it's income inequality, it's book bans, but there's really specific local issues that they want to solve. Deep ties to community, a love for the place they're running. And I actually think this is a thing that is coming through in the most effective campaigns. And it's something that when I talked to Sarah McBride, the now member of Congress from Delaware, who was a Run for Something alum when she ran for state senate, if you want to fall in love with your community, run for office, is what she told me. And I think about that a lot because I think if you love your community, run for office. Because the way in which you can transform the place you love and show up for the place you love and the place you call home by running is so meaningful. And I think the thing that most of these folks have in common that are really effective is they're normal people. They're just normal people who decided to do this extraordinary thing of running for office. Because they are ordinary people. They haven't been planning their entire lives to run for president. They haven't come from these like Nepo family dynasties. They are ordinary. They can communicate like ordinary people. They have ordinary interests. They're a little quirky. They're a little flawed. They sometimes have things that might have disqualified them in the past, but they are totally normal. And that makes them absolutely extraordinary. I think that's really special.
That last point is something that kind of sticks in my craw when it comes to the Democratic Party. We're spending $20 million to go on a listening tour to figure out what young men want. Here's a fucking idea for you. How about just run normal people who talk like normal people and talk to young men and are young men or are young women who have to talk to young men? How about just picking them up and running them? Then you don't have to do all the market research. It's just organic and, as you would say, authentic. I mean, why, Amanda? Why do we do this? Why do we go through these? Is it that like Democrat is originally from the Greek, and it means repeats facts smugly. And we feel like we need to focus group every last question in our lives. Like, I'm not sure whether I should show this freckle on my elbow. And so like, why do we need this? Why can't we just do the run for something thing?
Because it's hard. Because the run for something thing is hard, is the real answer. And I think it's interesting. I sit in these spaces where people will discuss the consultants, the focus groups, the ads, the messaging. It's like, it's because those are the things we think we can control, whereas we can't really control who runs for office, except we kind of can. And this is the thing that I think Run for Something has done, is like, we have opened the doors to a whole new class of folks who've never thought about themselves in leadership positions before. We can ask normal people to run, and we can help them do it. Now, we shouldn't set up roadblocks for it, but if we open the doors wide open to who could possibly see themselves in leadership, amazing people will step up and say, yeah, you know what, maybe me. And then we don't need to focus group the shit out of things. Like, yeah, there's stuff around the edges you can be more tactical about and be more efficient on, but we are trying to spend a bunch of money to mess with the things we can control because we think we can't control who runs. I would argue we can, and we should. And we should open the doors as wide as we can, because if we do, everything else downstream gets so much easier.
Does it take a big tent philosophy? I mean, one thing that you guys do focus on at Run for Something is recruiting progressives. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm wondering, is there a litmus test to that? And I want to give you a very specific example. Mm-hmm. I alluded at the top to one of my early experiences as a congressional staffer. I was working for a guy named Mike Michaud. He could have been, had you been around, were you an earlier generation person, he could have been a Run for Something recruit, because never went to college, was a mill worker, right? Ran for the state Senate, eventually rose to become the president of the Maine state Senate. Conservative, though. He was a conservative. He was in that second congressional district represented by Jared Golden, not territory that a progressive could win. And it set up a really interesting dilemma for me personally when I was considering going to work for him. He was someone who carried the label of being pro-life. Now, his personal thinking was more nuanced than that. He was more open-minded than that. But I had to ask myself, can I work for someone who is economically progressive, who is advancing the cause of putting Nancy Pelosi in the speaker's chair, who is generally with me on 95% of what I believe, and really authentically represents his community? I mean, his mill was shut down due to adverse effects of foreign trade 2 days before he was sworn in. So, this is, in every sense of the word, except for that piece, a progressive, I guess you would call him. And yet there is this piece. And it was a struggle for me. I decided, obviously, to go to work for him. I'm glad I did. But how do you grapple with this as you think about, you are right now doing as much as anyone in America to form the future of the Democratic Party? How do you think about that?
We do think about this as a big tent party, and understanding that a progressive in New York City is going to be a little bit different than a progressive in Iowa City. That'll be a little different than a progressive in Anchorage. We can all have shared values, pro-democracy, pro-truth, pro-tolerance, pro-equality. I do think at this point, pro-choice needs to be one of them because of how far the right has gone. Pro-LGBTQ rights, pro-climate change is real, and we have a responsibility to do something about it. Pro-reducing gun violence, pro-tackling the affordability crisis, all of those things. And the way that those show up in every election and for every community is going to look a little bit different. And it is not my job to tell people, to tell voters who they should vote for. It is my job as Run for Something to empower candidates to make the best possible arguments to their campaigns or to their communities, to be able to knock on doors, to be able to run ads, to be able to talk to people and build relationship. Then voters decide. And I think that it, for me, is the core of this, is you have to trust voters and give them agency in this relationship. Political operatives sometimes like to pre-screen to decide this person can win, this person can't. And it becomes a tautological truism, because if you invest the money up front, then yeah, maybe they will be able to. And then it's like, well, I did it, therefore it worked, therefore I should do it again. I think that is so faulty. We have no idea who can win. We have no idea what's going to happen. We should empower as many people as possible to make all the arguments they can, and then trust voters to make up their minds. It requires letting go of some control, which as a parent, is a story of life.
Do I have any control?
Not
Do
me.
I, right? Like, is that a thing? I want to ask about a comment that
Yeah.
I just saw here, because I wonder if this is, here we go. I'm picking on you today. You don't like my music. I promise to all of our regular commenters, I like your comments just as much. I'm just what's catching my eye here. What do you make of the David Hogg initiative? What, do we need to basically, one of the things you write about in your book, and you feel free to connect this dot back to your book, is that the boomers are getting things fundamentally wrong.
Yep.
Right. And you've got a generation of, with the exception of Jeffries here, you've got a generation of boomers here. So, what do you make of the idea that we're not going to get anywhere until we clear out the old guard?
Back in February, I wrote an op-ed for the Daily Beast. You can find it if you just Google my name plus Daily Beast. Excuse me. Saying that every Democrat over the age of 75 should make this their last term. They should retire. They should go out the front door, say so long, farewell, and create space for new leaders. Now, I'm pretty glad that since I wrote that, 5 United States senators, at least 4 United States senators, and at least 1 member of Congress have taken my advice, have moved on, and opened up exciting opportunities for competitive open primaries. I hope more listen. And every time one doesn't, every time someone announces they're running for re-election, I hope they get primaried. Because in this moment, we have a responsibility to send our best possible fighters out. And I don't think that any of these older leaders are our best. And if they are, they should have to make that case affirmatively. They should have to proactively tell voters why they are the right person for this moment, for this fight, why they have both the skills and the stomach to show up in this particular era of politics. Now, whether David is the right person to lead that is sort of like separate question. That's a hit for him to figure out. I think that there is so much opportunity here for amazing new leaders to rise. And they don't have to be. People say like, oh, we don't need inexperienced politicians. There are 1,500 millennials and Gen Z that run for something as helped elect in 49 states, in every district, save 2, where there are Democrats 75 years old or older. There's a run for something alum elected to local office. We have an incredible bench of talent for the future. Incredible. And to say that I, a 73-year-old, 78-year-old, Chuck Grassley, 91-year-old, am the right person to lead is the height of hubris and selfishness. It is the height of ego. It is putting yourself above your community and above your country. I do not like it.
Let me just warn people out there, do not say the word diversity. I'm sure that it is going to be filtered algorithmically, just like the word Trump. I'm going to say the word Trump as many times as I can. Fuck that guy. Just for fun. Sorry to the people on YouTube where that created a glitch in the matrix. I mean, look, I agree with you, Cynthia Rice. The Senate is old and full of white men. That is verifiably true. One of my fun Capitol Hill experiences was seeing Strom Thurmond as a young Capitol Hill staffer be led out of a car toward the Senate chamber. He looked like he was being electrocuted with every step. And I don't mean to make fun of an infirm old man. I'm not in favor of any human suffering, but I mean, it's absolutely. And, the thing that I think people miss about the gerontocracy is the problem isn't just old leaders. It's that we have an entire public policy that is massively skewed toward the well-being of older Americans. Look, I love older Americans. Many of them were my parents, apparently. So like, I'm not trying to stone cold diss an entire sector of the American electorate, but goodness gracious, 1/6 of Americans who are children are in poverty. Yeah. There's something so deeply fucked up about that. And we seem to have our values and our priorities completely skewed as a society. So, okay. I will say, though, that I'm against the David Hogg initiative. I don't think that the best approach for Democrats is to form a circular firing squad and take aim and let loose. I'd rather put that energy outward into and let nature take its course and just shuffle these folks off the stage through natural power dynamics. That said, let's get to the crux of the question. Are you with David Shore or not? Are we losing this generation of young voters?
No, I don't think so. I am compelled by the argument that this is how would you describe it? A moment in which we did lose them in 2024, but they are not lost forever. I think these are younger voters who are disillusioned with the institutions, which I understand. I too am disillusioned by the institutions. They're not Republicans. Those are not Democrats. And that is really the thing, is we need to give them a leader that can transcend the political partisan identity. That will be hard. And it's probably not someone that we are currently in conversation about. Doesn't mean not a politician, but someone who can run bigger than the party label. And I think we got to talk about the things they care about. And I know people are like, oh, Kamala Harris had a housing plan. Kamala Harris had a child care plan, all of that. Sometimes, yes, she did, but also not about renters, which most young people are renters.
Yeah.
Not about child care in a way that people could actually feel. Not about student loans in a way they could actually feel. Most of it felt very abstract and very complicated and very means-tested and very messy. It was overly complex. I feel so strongly, and I think there's proof of this in the last 6 months, that if we give young people a candidate they can get excited about, a person that they can get excited about, because this is the thing, people don't vote for policies, they vote for people. If we can give them a person that they can get excited about, we can win them back.
I think the missing ingredient, just to pick up on your last point, you see this in the Kamala Harris campaign struggle, which, she was handed in the NBA, you call it like tossing your teammate a hand grenade. Like, they pulled the pin, they said, here you go, good luck. So I'm not casting shade at her entire campaign effort. But I think what's been missing for Democrats for a very long time is a compelling answer to the question of, what do you want to do on the economy? What do you want to do? And I'm not talking about an Elizabeth Warren-esque 10-point plan. By the way, I love Elizabeth Warren. She is behind the scenes. Like I was running a congressional campaign in Massachusetts in 2012 when she was running. She is the warmest, most personable, most laid back. She's a good hang. That none of that comes through. Okay. I mean, none of that comes through. There's your authenticity problem right there.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I mean, she's also burdened by being one of the most intelligent people in the Senate. And so that's a lot of brain to carry around. But I mean, at the very least, she was putting out ideas. And I just wrote this up in Newsweek a few weeks ago. I keep coming back to the Bill Clinton 1992 haiku, right? Change versus more of the same. The economy's stupid. Don't forget healthcare. I mean, what is it about that formula that we seem to have forgotten as Democrats? I mean, for one thing, the change mantle. If there's one thing that seems to come through so crystal clear in your book and in your writing on Substack, it's you have picked up on the fundamental, like the axle around which everything turns in American politics for 30 years now has been change, the change theme. And why don't we grab a fucking hold of it? I do not understand. That's number one. Number two, the economy's stupid. The economy stupid. And number three, and MJ, I love writing haikus too. It's a dinner time game that I play with my kids where we can only speak in haikus. And yes, I'm a mega nerd. I know that's characterized as child abuse in many places. And I'm sorry, not sorry. I love haikus. And finally, don't forget healthcare. Remember that don't forget healthcare connects to the second point about the economy stupid. It connects to the cost side. If we have heard voters screaming one thing loud and clear in the last election, it's things cost too fucking much. And as much as we touted the jobs numbers, it was like, okay, but I can't afford life. I can't afford childcare. I can't afford education. I can't afford the rent. So the formula is right there. Tell me, campaign expert Amanda Litman, what am I missing here?
The leaders and candidates who got us to this point will not be the ones to get us to the next one, has been my mantra, basically since November. I think it is so hard for the folks who have built these systems and built these institutions to admit that they are failing or that they're not working for everyone. It is hard. I talked about this, I went on TV and said this about Joe Biden 2 years ago. You can't gaslight people into thinking things are good when they don't feel good. Even if the macroeconomic levels are good, I pay my rent, I pay my childcare bills. It's fucking expensive. You can't tell me the economy is good when I'm shelling out this much money for my daycare bills every month. Maybe it is, but not for me. It must be good for someone else. In the same way, like when the House Democrats, when they had power, but they couldn't actually get stuff through the Senate, they'd be like, we passed a bill to raise the minimum wage. Cool. Did it go into effect? Did it actually do anything for anyone? It seems like if not, you did it for someone else. What about for me? That tension, I think, between the folks that built these institutions that were often well-intended and the folks experiencing the effects of those institutions means that we can't fix it with the people who built it. We've got to get a new generation of leaders in here. And I think that is where the excitement is. That's also where the fear is, because change is scary. Change is also inevitable. We have to be open to that, because the way that got us to this moment is not going to get us to the next one. The people, the playbooks, the skills, the tactics. Like, I don't think anything that Trump has done has been good. However, I think the fact that he has burned it all down means we get to rebuild it better.
Well, that is Blue Lining's playbook, my friend. That is the definite rosy take on what we are going through. But I'm here for it. I love it. I screwed up about 27 years ago. I had a girlfriend working in Congress, a congressional staffer, who went on to a very prominent career in Democratic politics. Leave that aside. And her big issue, it's my mea culpa to the world here, her big issue was work-life balance. She actually led a congressional caucus as a staffer on that issue. I didn't get it. I didn't, even though my undergraduate training was in economics, my graduate training was in public policy, I was like, I didn't get it. And maybe it's because I was infused with the new economy, new frontier, Clinton roaring 90s stuff. I don't know. But I did try to make amends. Because I super duper power got it once I got into my own congressional career, staff career. And I'm going to, please disagree with me, because I'm about to try to interpret your work. Please disagree with me. I think if there is a through line from your book to your Run for Something work to this conversation, to your Substack and what you've been talking about in media, it's you are connecting to your own lived experience as a super mom, as a very successful professional. And you think that the political equation and the political future is going to go to the party and the candidates who can speak to people in their lives and how to make their lives work and how to address the cost side and the income side and the how do you make all of this work? How do you speak to the working parent who's trying to figure out how to do the game of pass the football with their spouse? Or maybe you're a single parent and you're trying to figure out the pickup from daycare. And I mean, you got to be at work because you got to afford the freaking daycare, which is kind of a weird do loop. And, you've got to figure out the healthcare picture. And maybe you're going to try to get a better job, but how do you make the hours for that work with the fact that you need to spend time with your kids? The party that can figure out, this is my postcard from the future back to myself 27 years ago. The party that can figure that out and speak to that in an authentic way, they're going to have a hold on the future. Agree? Disagree? What am I getting wrong?
Agree. And I have been working on my personal Substack, amandalitman.substack.com. I have a piece I think I'll send on Friday because I try and do these every Friday.
There it is.
In particular, about the way the young women conservative conference, the Turning Point USA Conference for Young Conservative Women. There's an article in New York Times, Washington Post, New York Magazine, and each
Yeah,
of
I was
the
just mentioning at the top. It's a
and
chilling read.
it's fascinating.
Yeah, noted feminist Charlie Kirk leads the way on the future for women. I know. When I was trying to figure out how to help my 14-year-old daughter understand her future as a woman in America, I definitely pointed her to the work of Charlie Kirk.
It's a man that understands what ladies want. It was really interesting that you read each of these stories, and each of the writers, talks about like the same anecdote of a young woman standing up to ask a question of like, we had a whole bunch of speakers yesterday imploring us to like have a family, don't go to college, don't get a job, marry and have kids. And each one of them speaking is a career woman who has not done this. Like, how am I supposed to square the circle here? And the speaker points back to them like, you notice all the career women are telling you to have kids. Well, one, that's like not quite intellectually honest, but two, the thing that each of those writers points to is that, and all these writers are, career women themselves, points to is like, the conservatives are telling a story about my anxieties back to me, and then they're telling me that they can solve it. Now, the villain that they are pointing to is feminism. The villain in the actuality is like capitalism, sorry, men, a broken story about masculinity that has made men like unable to stand up for their partners. It's not their fault either. It's billionaires. It's a society that has failed us. But I've been thinking about that a lot, of like the way in which Democrats need to reclaim this idea that it's not that you can have it all, but that like we can create a society where you can have enough of money, have enough of support, have enough love, have enough joy, have enough time, because that's what rich people get. Rich people get time. And that is a through line to like everything I have done, to the work that we do at Run for Something about what it means to get better leaders, to the book about When We're in Charge, about, in which so much of it is about how can you create a system of leadership that is sustainable. And if you do it right for yourself as an executive, as a business leader, you will also have time and have freedom to be a better partner, a better parent, a better friend, a better citizen. And your team will have that too. Like, how can we create a world where everyone has enough? And how can we get away from this? I know abundance is like a trigger word for people, but like, how can we operate from a place of abundance where actually there is more? There is more for everyone. We don't have to be fighting over the same amount of pie. We can make more pie.
I want to ask you about that. This is a point that you raised in your interview with Vanity Fair. And you said, or you're thinking about how to do things differently, how to run a campaign, but also how to rethink the role of government in people's lives. And it's interesting that you bring up abundance, because that is the buzzword. Kudos to you, Ezra and Derek. You've done a good thing. You've started a conversation. That's your job. Great. Yeah. I think abundance is necessary, but not sufficient. I think it's a great idea. I don't think it's a winning campaign idea to say, we're the party of cutting red tape. Good. I'm for that. But I still think that it comes down to the haiku, and it comes down to, what are you going to do to, the economy's stupid, and don't forget healthcare. Those are the two sides of the coin, right? It's, what are we going to change to make the economy better and to make your life livable and keep your costs down? And I don't see Democrats really doing the hard work to think about that and to come up with an answer that's not just, and I said this to Bernie's former chief of staff, Michaeline Kroll, my friend, on this show 2 weeks ago. So I feel like I can say it again. The answer can't just be another redistributive government program, because that's sort of our image. That's our brand. That's all we're about. What's new? Like what is our new, fresh idea to do what you're talking about? And again, I think it's, how can people feel like they can get ahead, right? But it's not such a horrifying grind. And what that comes down to me is your Vanity Fair quote is, what do Democrats think is the role of government in all of that these days? What should the government be doing to make that happen?
And I think the answer, I'm so compelled by some of the conversations around abundance lately. You're right. It's not a platform position. It's a framework for thinking about like policy. And it's about like reorienting the difference between what if we were focused on outcomes, not process. I am compelled by that conversation. I found the criticism of abundance to be like, so some of it good faith, some of it very personality driven. If they don't like the people writing it, so they find reasons to be mad about it, which is fine, I guess. Mostly, I think the idea that like some of our problems, especially around housing, which I am a believer in that every problem is a housing problem when you get down to it, especially housing, we just need to build more. And we should do everything we can to cut through the bullshit and build more. We should build more housing because you know what else building more housing solves? The loneliness crisis and the affordability crisis and the childcare crisis and the family community crisis and also the commute crisis, which is killing people because commuting directly affects your quality of life. What if you could afford to live where you want to live and work where you want to work and be near the people you want to be? What if? What could be possible?
Right.
That's what I think we need Democrats to do more of is like reimagine what if you were not limited by the constraints of current systems and could build a new one? What would it look like?
Yeah.
Smarter people than me can come up with policy answers to this. I want to imagine a world where actually like, you know, and I wrote about this in Teen Vogue, like what if work didn't suck? What if your life wasn't so hard? What if it didn't feel bad all the time to go to your job and then come home and like grind it out caring for your kids and feel like you were barely making ends meet?
Yeah.
What? That's the question.
And actually, Teen Vogue is the perfect outlet for that because I think that captures something. I really do. And, you know, again, I don't think the answer here is bless you, Senator Warren, more 10-point plans. Because look, go back to 2019. You can find all of her. There's a whole, what did Mitt Romney call binders of women? Well, there are binders of brilliant policy ideas from a woman. You could have that. We have binders full of ideas. But I do and look, I want to go to something that people are talking about in the chat here. This idea that abundance sounds like a PR term. I agree it does. And someone said a polygraph lie detector. Love it. Because it literally is. Well, it is. And I think it's both. Like you need to have a compelling idea and you need to have a compelling package. And again, to me, I think there's plenty there's a passel of ideas out there that aren't just, bless you, Bernie, you know, another big, bold government program, but that aren't just, you know, turning the keys over to the private sector. As someone was saying in the chats here, there aren't private sector solutions to poverty. Agreed.
Totally.
Agreed. But, you know, again, like, I mean, there's a ton. Interstate high-speed railways. Great. You know, my old boss, Mike, who was one of 3 working union members in Congress when I was working for him, you know, again, one of the reasons that I was like, yeah, I'm going to work for this guy, even though we do have a fundamental difference here, is here was someone who was thinking innovatively about what is the future of unions in America? What can they do for people? And, you know, I wish people had listened to him because we're losing unions. We're losing union members. And, you know, yeah, I mean, there's a place for government in healthcare, but it comes down to this question of what is the role of government and what are we pitching to give answers to the haiku? That's what it is to me. I have a provocative one for you here. And by the way, I'm going to open up like I did last time as a closing segment here. I want to open up the opportunity to everyone in the chats to engage in the segment Matt GPT. This is where you ask some kind of a question. You pose some kind of a proposition, a question like you would to ChatGPT. And like ChatGPT, I will give you a well-sourced, researched answer and also occasionally hallucinate. And I will invite Amanda to also weigh in from her vast wealth of knowledge. Amanda, do you hate baby boomers? Because you seem to have it in for them in your book.
I do not hate baby boomers. I do think baby boomers should take a step back. I don't hate them. I love my dad's a baby boomer. My grandma's a baby boomer. I love the boomers that I know and trust. And I think that there is a generationally expansive situation in which the boomers have been holding on for too long. Just hold on for too long. Just like go spend time with your loved ones. You don't need to work until you die. You don't. It doesn't seem that fun. Sorry, boomers. My daughters are going to have to fight in the water wars because of the decisions you made around climate change 15 years ago. So like,
I shouldn't laugh. That's so true.
I can be a little mean, you know?
Well, I'm going to once again I'm going to ask you another provocative question in a moment. I'm just filibustering to put out once again, if people would like to enter a question, it could be a random topic. It could be a random topic. Wait, hold on. Cynthia's throwing some loving provocative shade at you, like I am. So it could be on any topic, but feel free to put in a Matt GPT question in the chat. What about my generation? What about Gen X? Because we are, it's interesting, like the Democrats' answer to, okay, we're going to get rid of the boomers is we're going to bring in the Gen X. That's our youth movement. Are we any better?
Yeah, you are. But the person to be mad at that it's actually about to be a millennial takeover is not the millennials, it's the boomers. And two, Cynthia, I want the boomer vote, not their voice. Your voices are being heard. I promise you. You make up a majority of Congress. You make up a majority of voters. You make up a majority of donors. You make up a majority of homeowners. Your voices are being heard. The problem is that young people's voices are not. And yes, you're going to respond and say, well, then they should vote. They are voting. They're voting more and more. But you know what structurally has made it very hard for young people to vote? Republican laws around voter suppression. So I want to be very clear here. We will get better outcomes when more generations are sitting at the table, because generation is a heuristic to get at things like race, class, gender, sexual orientation, identity, lived experience. We know this in business. Diverse teams get better outcomes. We need diversity in all its forms. I know we talked about earlier, that's a hot word for folks. I think we got to lean into it because it's good. And ultimately it is good.
I do agree. And this is a tricky one. I wrote a very provocative article for Raw Story back in, I want to say it was 21, in which I said it was time to overthrow the gerontocracy. And I got an earful from my mother, which is fine. That's her job. And I meant it in the nicest possible way. And what I was really talking about was not the power position in elected bodies. I really was talking about, we need to rethink the overall flow of societal resources. Because if I know one thing about my parents' generation, it's that actually they wish more resources were going to their grandkids, and they wish their grandkids had more opportunities. And there's something pandering and screwed up about the way we have directed our Medicare, Social Security. I'm not saying we should whack entitlements, but we've devoted 2/3 of our societal resources to people over age 65. And that seems to be both a kind of a societal priority problem, and it also seems to be a political problem. Because how are you going to connect with and inspire the younger voters who are in your demographic if you're constantly locked into that kind of a pander cycle? All right. I want to close out here. Let's see what we are getting here. This is a provocative one. I'm not sure I understand it, but I'm going to try it. I'm assuming this is a Matt GPT question. What do you think about removing R from future ballots in 2026? I'm going to interpret that on the fly, because it's obviously not legal to just like take Republicans off the ballots. But the reason I chose this one is that I think it connects to your day job, which is one of the things you've pointed out in your prior appearances on my show is that you run for something reaches down to the level of nonpartisan elections. You reach down to the county level, and you're kind of creating that bench of people who are of their community, for their community, and don't necessarily fit into kind of a cookie cutter political mold that we might apply if we're thinking about members of Congress and governors and so forth. And I don't think we can effectively remove R when it comes to the congressional ballot, but what we can do is the workaround. And yes, I'm buttering you up. Okay, you're the guest. I'm allowed to do that. What we can do is the effective workaround that you're doing, which is let's get the bench, let's get the feeder system. By the way, not just for future prospects of taking power at the federal level, but also because the immense amount of power that's wielded at the local level. Let's engage in those nonpartisan or uncontested elections where just having a D on the ballot, people may not even notice. They may not vote the party line at that level. Let's get people into those positions and start steering from the rudder, not just from the helm. That is my interpretive answer with maybe some hallucination to that question. Amanda, your thoughts?
I thought that was a great answer. And I think that one of the things that local government, local leaders can do is, because they have to actually govern, they have to pick up the trash, they have to clean the streets, they have to get stuff built, they have to work with other parties, they have to work with people across coalition. It's one of my favorite things about working on these local races is they build very unlikely friends and unlikely enemies sometimes, because local government at the end of the day has to mean like lived government. It has to be government you can live with. And that more so than anything else requires you to cut through some of the partisan bullshit.
Yeah. And I'll tell you that these kinds of connections are real. You know, there's a guy who I'm another basketball dad with him. You know, we coach, we're dads in the stands together. He is a Republican. He voted for Trump. He's also a local office holder. Now, he's in the town over, so I didn't get the opportunity to vote for him. But when it turns out that when it comes to how to manage a town, I actually agree with him. I actually agree with a lot of his approach. You know, and by the way, by starting a conversation with him about that, I got him around to realizing things like, you know, jobs numbers that he didn't know about. We were able to engage in conversations about where high prices come from, you know, and vaccines, all kinds of issues. It was sort of like a starting point. And, you know, even here in the chats, I see there's been a little bit of a heated back and forth between someone who was doing a little bit of provocative, you know who I'm talking about here, a little bit of provocative trolling, perhaps, talking about Democratic Party protests, which I kind of agree. I'm very mixed on the value of protesting. But, you know, this person also pointed out that I have been a guest on his show. He's a libertarian. And it's because I mean, I write for Newsweek. It's because I agree in engaging in spaces that aren't just all Democrats, aren't just all people who agree with me on all issues. And that's how you get somewhere. So I'm going to circle that back to I know it would be great to be able to take the party off the ballot line. That would be interesting. That would be fun. But I think the workaround is you can effectively do that by running people at the local level, running people at the state level, and also engaging with people on those kinds of issues, because it becomes sort of the funnel that allows you to then get into, well, did you know that we've had the most job creation under Joe Biden in the last 6 months that we've ever had in American history? I did not know that. That is interesting. So it becomes a way of moving beyond getting locked into those party labels. Okay. I have taken up such a gob of your time when you're busy on so I'm just going to splash this up here one more time. The book is When We're in Charge. And you're also the author of Don't Just March, Run for Something, which, given my feelings about the value of protests, you know, I kind of agree with that. Actually getting out and doing something is great. AmandaLitman.substack.com is the Substack. What are you working on next?
Making sure that we're recruiting and supporting as many people as possible to run for office this year and next.
Amen to that. All right. So Amanda Litman, thank you so much. I hope people will check out the book and the Substack. Start with the Substack and you'll keep getting reminders for the book. You'll find the book. Let's push it onto the bestseller list. We can get there. I know not in the first attempt, but we're going to get there.
We'll get there. Yeah. And if you have Spotify Premium, you already have access to the audiobook. So go listen to it.
What? What? That is exciting. I read all my books on audio. I don't read physical books.
I narrated it. So if you want to hear my voice just yapping away in your ears for about 7 hours,
shut the front door. That's what people have gotten for the last hour, and my voice, which, you know,
get it for free.
Yes, exactly. All right. And I will be back next week. I'm sorry for people who are bigger fans of Cliff. I'm not exactly Cliff. I'm my own thing, but I hope you will be back next week. on the Cliff's Edge and Worth Knowing live stream. Take care. Have a good week. Stay safe. Be well. And I will see everyone next week.
Thanks for having me.